Ethiopia's government launched a manhunt on Sunday for leaders of a rebellious faction in Tigray, after announcing that federal forces had taken control of the northern region's capital and that the conflict was over. Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed said an offensive on Mekelle had been successful within a few hours of being launched, and that federal police were now pursuing criminals from the powerful Tigrayan People's Liberation Front. But TPLF leader Debretsion Gebremichael says his troops will fight on, because this was an issue of, quote, our right to self-determination. Regional diplomats and experts have warned that a rapid military victory might not signal the end of the conflict, and the TPLF has a long history of guerrilla resistance. Thousands are estimated to have died since fighting erupted on November the 4th, and nearly 44,000 have fled to Sudan. In a border camp on Saturday, the UN's High Commissioner for Refugees, Filippo Grandi, said that while refugees are uncomfortable with living in exile, their biggest fear is inter-communal violence when they return.
This is why I think that going forward it will be important for the government of Ethiopia to re-establish peace, to have a silence of the guns, but also to ensure that there are no retaliation or reprisals between communities, because this is what many have mentioned to me as a primary source of fear.
6 explosions were reported in Asmara, the capital of neighboring Eritrea, on Saturday night, according to the US State Department. It was not immediately clear if they were related to the Tigray conflict, but Tigrayan forces have previously fired rockets into Eritrea, who they accuse of sending troops in support of the Ethiopian military.
Upholding the rule of law.
The conflict has been a major test for Abiy, who took office 2 years ago and is trying to hold together a patchwork of ethnic groups that make up Ethiopia's 115 million people.
The International Committee of the Red Cross says hospitals in the Tigray capital of Mekelle are running dangerously low on medical supplies to care for the wounded and to address all other mounting medical needs. According to the International Red Cross, the influx of wounded has forced hospitals to suspend many other medical services so that limited staff and resources could be devoted to emergency medical care. Staff from the ICRC visited a hospital called the Ida Referral Hospital and say approximately 80% of patients to be suffering from trauma injuries. The hospital is also lacking in body bags for the deceased. Food supplies are also low, affecting particularly those recovering from surgery and requiring specific nutritional needs. Hospitals in Tigray are increasingly relying on humanitarian assistance. The United Nations Refugee Agency warns Tigrayan refugees arriving in Sudan fear inter-communal violence in Ethiopia's Tigray region. Since the 3-week conflict began, over 43,000 people have crossed into Sudan border states seeking urgent refuge after their homes were destroyed by shelling.
The conflict in Ethiopia's Tigray region began earlier this month after Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed announced an operation against the Tigrayan People's Liberation Front, accusing the party of attacking the army's Northern Command headquarters in Mekelle. Meanwhile, the UNHCR has begun assisting refugees who have been arriving in growing numbers with humanitarian aid and shelter. UNHCR Chief Filippo Grandi warns the conflict in Tigray could fuel conflict in other parts of the country.
They are very uncomfortable being in exile. Many of them, as I've said many times already, have left behind everything, relatives, their work. Most of them are farmers, and it is the harvest time and they cannot do it, so a major source of livelihood is lost. And they are afraid of conflict, but more than conflict, I would say they are afraid of inter-communal violence. This is why I think that going forward it will be important for the government of Ethiopia to re-establish peace.
About $150 million is needed over the next 6 months to help manage the crisis. Grandi says internet shutdowns have impeded the rights to operate in the midst of political turmoil.
Without access, it's difficult to have information and to inform the refugees here, to help them inform. And even for them, it's difficult with the lack of communication. So it's not an easy time to make that assessment. In Ethiopia, really, my biggest concern as UNHCR at the moment is the Eritrean refugees. Almost 100,000. without this daily support that we were providing. I visited myself those camps a couple of years back, and with the additional risk there of some violence.
The conflict in Ethiopia is driven by identity, ethnic politics, and competition over land and natural resources. Most incidents of non-governmental violence involve the loosening of political controls run by militia groups. Continued violence across the country has led to different ethnic groups and regions pushing for increased power and autonomy.
Villagers in northeast